Hello and thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Federalist Files. On today's show, we discuss the heat Tucker Carlson is getting from the media and military politicians, some troubling news on how our military would fare against China, Washington Post retracts a story about Trump, and Biden looking to raise taxes after coronavirus spending bill.
You were mentioning, Chris, about how all these states are reopening. They're reopening at 100%. And we have a very narrow window to tie reopening policy to vaccination status. Because otherwise, if everything is reopened, then what's the carrot going to be? How are we going to incentivize people to actually get the vaccine? So that's why I think the CDC and the Biden administration needs to come out a lot bolder and say, if you're vaccinated, you can do all these things. Here are all these freedoms that you have. Because otherwise, people are going to go out and enjoy these freedoms anyway.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. I just wanted to hit on first, I am very grateful. It has been very humbling doing this podcast thus far. I have about 1.9 thousand or 1,900 followers on Rumble. I'm getting a lot more activity on our Facebook page. So I do greatly appreciate everybody for making the podcast what it has been thus far. I am very surprised with its progress thus far. So I greatly appreciate you all every day tuning in, dropping the mic on people, as in my name, Mike, letting them know about the podcast. I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful for the progress that this podcast and this program has shown thus far over the last couple of months, or the first couple of months of its inception. So to get to that first, this opening monologue. You have Chris Cuomo. This is Chris Cuomo's show on CNN. They have I guess it's their doctor. I've never even seen this woman before, but this is their doctor, and obviously a lefty extremist, just by the character, the nature, and what she is saying, the terms that she's setting for the American people. It is the assumption that, we can't open up the economy, we can't open up the country too quickly, because if that happens, then why would the people go and get the vaccination? We can't hold that carrot in front of them. That's literally, and I don't like to say the word literally very often, but that is literally what she just said. She said, how are we going to hold the carrot like we are animals, like we are horses, like the government has been riding us this entire time like ponies, which they have. A lot of the population, not all of us, but those liberals out there that aren't paying attention to what's going on, and take the word of the experts that have been wrong consistently. I'm including Fauci, which I'm going to have a couple clips of him today as well, flip-flopping, and just being incompetent in his core. So that's it for that. Chris Cuomo, I'm surprised he didn't even say anything. He didn't try to cut this woman off. He let her go forward with the messaging of CNN, made CNN look pretty bad overall, but I guess that's what the American people want. Everybody wants full-on vaccine. I was just reading something today. I don't know. I cannot conclude if it is true, because it was a quick headline that I read, and Biden was saying that everybody should get a vaccine, or all the people. We have to make sure everyone, the entire population, is vaccinated, because they're talking about herd immunity, and they don't think herd immunity is going to be reached unless if every single person is vaccinated. So if they're going to go for a mandatory vaccination, I just can't see them going for it. If they do, there's going to be some serious backlash from the people. Things could get physical. I don't see it happening, hopefully not, but there will definitely be a mass non-compliance. I'm sure of that. So biggest news story of this week, it happened a couple days ago. Tucker Carlson comes out in a monologue, and he talks about he's actually completely misinterpreted in his criticism of the military. His criticism of the military originally is when Joe Biden was asked about, China's raising this many troops, they have this many people, they have increased their military power within the last 10 years almost exponentially. They've increased the amount of troops, the amount of tanks, the amount of naval warships that they have. They have increased their power almost exponentially. What do you have to say about that? And Biden went on rambling about women in flight suits and how we've made flight suits for pregnant women. And then that is what Tucker's reaction is. So I'll play the clip for you. Play 3.
Some of it's relatively straightforward work, where we're making good progress designing body armor that fits women properly, tailoring combat uniforms for women, creating maternity flight suits, updating requirements for their hairstyles. And some of it is going to take an intensity of purpose and mission to really change the culture and habits that cause women to leave the military.
So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military. While China's military becomes more masculine as it's assembled the world's largest navy, our military needs to become, as Joe Biden says, more feminine, whatever feminine means anymore, since men and women no longer exist. The bottom line is it's out of control, and the Pentagon's going along with this. Again, this is a mockery of the U.S. military and its core mission, which is winning wars.
So Tucker goes ahead, he torches him, and then the response was tenfold from the media as well as the military. Not the military, the rank and file officers or the lower level rank and file infantrymen of the military themselves, but we had people come out from, I guess, the higher ranks, the lieutenants, the commanders, the whatever you would call them, and they're the ones that are giving Tucker a hard time, which is a real cause for concern when you have your military, the heads of your military, getting political. That is the point. There's actually, in military school, while you're in the military, you're going through your training, you are told not to be political, and you actually take classes on how not to be political, and if you're ever dressed in uniform, never make political statements, things of that nature, because it is supposed to be a non-partisan organization, our military. And what his point is, and the point that Tucker is attempting to make here, really isn't even talking about women per se. He's just saying it's absolutely outrageous that we have pregnant women flying planes in our military, which I can agree with. In terms of battlefield acumen, efficacy on the battlefield, women are inferior. For the most part, in general sense, they are. Men... They actually had a study that I'm going to get into. So let's see. I'm going to get into that later. But first, I guess I'll talk about his fight. So military fights with Tucker Carlson. I have a revolver piece. It is an op-ed. The United States military is the greatest the world has ever seen because of its diversity. Pentagon Press Secretary John F. Kirby said during a news briefing this morning. Kirby addressed this because a Fox cable show host used his show to denigrate the contributions of women in the military and to say the Chinese military is catching up to the U.S. military because it does not allow women to serve in the percentage the United States does. Now, I don't know necessarily, and that's the Department of Defense is the one that actually states this. This is straight off the Department of Defense's website. So now we have the Department of Defense, we have our military being politicized. And this is never a good sign, having the military politicized. And they're misconceiving the argument from Tucker Carlson to begin with. It is they're conflating. They're conflating him saying that we should not have pregnant women flying planes or fighter jets, and how the military and how Biden's handling the situation, saying, oh, well, we're doing all these other things to reincorporate and try to diversify our fighting force, which that is not the answer. The answer is not diversification. That is not how our fighting force, when it comes to saving lives, when it comes to winning, that's all the military is for. The military specifically is for winning and saving the most U.S. lives possible. That is the point in having the military. The military is not out there for diversity. If you tell me, hey, we have a diverse force, but 12 of the people in our battalion are going to die, or hey, we have a non-diverse force and 0 people in our battalion are going to die, the answer is quite clear. It is quite obvious. So the military also spent most of 2020 vowing to overhaul the force to maximize diversity and inclusion as opposed to, say, fighting prowess. In December, Defense Secretary Mark Esper announced a review of all aptitude tests administered by the military to ensure these tests did not hinder the higher goal of diversity. See, I remember actually reporting this in the very inception of the podcast. It was one of my very first current events. They're thinking about getting rid of the non-gender standard, meaning everyone needed to do the exact same thing to make it through training and to reach the requirements to be considered battlefield ready or battlefield tested, to be in combat rather than behind the scenes working intelligence. Me personally, I think women would be much better in those positions if you were to place them somewhere in the military. Now, if they have the same standard, if they are able to hold the same standard as the men, I think that then go for it, put them on the battlefield. The chances, from what I read, was 65. I think it's something like women. It's a very high percentage of them don't make it through basic. Apparently, from what I've read, it's just not effective. There's a reason why Navy SEALs don't have any women in their force. There's a reason why the Army Rangers had 2 women that went through their training, got through their training, and then never went and saw combat after that. There's a reason for all of that. It's just because there are biological differences between women and men. And now it is not a federal right to serve in the military. And then there is the dissenting opinions from the people that are in the military. They say, oh, well, you don't have the right to say anything about the military. You were never in the military, so why does it matter what you have to say? And this is what my response is. We pay taxes to the military. I can talk about anything. To begin with, this is a free country. I can talk about anything I want to. But I can talk about anything where I'm sitting there paying taxes into a program, into a system. If your approach and your answer is you can't talk about it unless if you were in it, so we can't talk about the government unless if we work in government, is that the argument that you're trying to make? If that is the argument, then we are on a slippery slope towards tyranny. If you cannot speak about or criticize the military, you can't criticize the government unless if you worked in the government. It's just a fallacious argument. And that's what I've been seeing from the left. There was somebody that was the head of the Department of Defense or one of the very mainstream high-end generals that said something like, oh, just so you know, Tucker Carlson, he tweeted it. Tucker Carlson, what did he say? He said, Tucker Carlson, you're not under attack by the military. If you were being under attack, you would know. He said something like that, just like a false kind of passive-aggressive response to Tucker Carlson. And to begin with, I really don't see much of an issue with what he said. I just don't. I mean, there are biological differences. And additionally, I have a Marine Corps study here, and it concludes that all male units perform better than mixed units. And this is from 2015. This is a Marine. So Tucker Carlson confirmed what the Marine Corps said. I think it was a 2015 study, so 6 years ago. And now they're coming out. We have Marine guys in the top ranks of the Marine Corps attacking him for it. Attacking him for confirming what they already confirmed through a study 6 years ago. Because now from what I understand, from what I've been reading, and what other people that have military experience have been saying, is these people that are now the commanders of the forces are political appointees. They are nothing better than politicians. Politicians have infiltrated our military because there is money to be made in the military system. And starting wars, creating wars, and starting conflict, there is money to be made. They are politicians. So that's why they are very willing to get into war, to attack other countries, to attack other forces, knowing that there will be a response and there will be bloodshed on the American side because they were never in combat themselves. There are people that are politically appointed to the position. They never saw combat themselves. So let's just make that clear before we get into this. So the study states, a year-long Marine Corps study trying to understand how gender integration would affect combat readiness has found that all male units were faster, more lethal, and able to evacuate casualties in less time. Overall, according to a summary of the study, all male squads performed better than mixed groups in 69% of the tasks evaluated. So in a general sense, all male groups were better than mixed groups, as in co-ed, men and women. So NPR's Tom Bowman filed this report for our newscast unit. It states, And I quote, "The Marines created a battalion of 100 female and 300 male volunteers. During the past year, they trained in North Carolina and California, taking part in realistic combat exercises. All male squads," the study found, "performed better than mixed-gender units across the board. The males were more accurate hitting targets, faster at climbing over obstacles, better at avoiding injuries. The Marine study says its main focus is maximum combat effectiveness, because it means fewer casualties. The Marines have not said whether the study's results will lead them to ask for a waiver that bars women from ground combat jobs. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said he hopes to open all combat jobs to women." So even after the study, they're talking about, and this is the defense secretary, once again, that's another political position. In 2015, this was Obama's defense secretary saying this. Even with this study by the Marine Corps being able to unequivocally confirm that in combat positions, full male squads are much more effective than women. I'm going to go over some of the numbers here that they have. So, body composition, males averaged 178 pounds, 20% body fat. Females average 142 pounds with 24% body fat. So they weigh less and they have more body fat. Now that still has nothing to do with their anaerobic power and their anaerobic capacity and their aerobic capacity. Let's get into those numbers. So females possess 15% less power than males in terms of their anaerobic power. The female top 25th percentile overlaps with the bottom 25th percentile for males. So males on average had more anaerobic power, as in lifting, ability to lift things up, power that way. Now, anaerobic capacity. Females possessed 15% less capacity. The female top 10th percentile overlaps the bottom 50th percentile of males. So I guess that has to do with their ability, how far they can run, the distance, I believe. And the aerobic capacity, VO2 max, which that has to do with their ability, I guess, their breathing. Females had 10% lower capacity. The female top 10th percentile overlaps with bottom 50th percentile of males. So the top 10 out of 100 women make the bottom 50% of males. So if you want to give, that is my point, that women need to reach the same standard as males. If we're going to do it this way, it needs to be that way. It doesn't need to be, we need to change the rules, we need to change the standards for women. It's an unequal system. It's also not a meritocracy system, and it's going to get people killed out there on the battlefield. Within the research at the Infantry Training Battalion, females undergoing that entry-level training were injured at, and this is very important, especially in combat, females undergoing that entry-level training were injured at more than 6 times the rate of their male counterparts. 27% of female injuries were attributed to the task of movement under load, compared to 13% for their male counterparts carrying a similar load, so it's carrying weight. During the assessment, musculoskeletal injury rates were 40.5% for females compared to 18.8% for males. So you had 4 out of 10 women getting injured and having musculoskeletal injuries, which I'm assuming bone injuries. Of the 21 time loss injuries incurred by female Marines, 19 were lower extremity injuries, and 16 occurred during a movement under load task. So mostly women just they do not have the same aerobic capacity or aerobic power that men do in terms of lifting weights. Men are just stronger that way. They also have a better O2 capacity because their lungs are bigger. It's just biological differences simply. The summary of the Marine Corps study quotes a 1992 reported from the Presidential Commission on the Assignment of Women in the Armed Forces. That was the last time the government studied the effect of gender integration on ground combat units. According to that commission, winning a war is sometimes only a matter of inches. And this is the 1992 study. Check out what they say. It's very important. Back then, the commission concluded unnecessary distraction or any dilution of the combat effectiveness puts the mission and lives in jeopardy, risking the lives of a military unit in combat to provide career opportunities or accommodate the personal desires or interests of an individual or group of individuals is more than bad military judgment. It is morally wrong, end quote. The ramifications of this it's reprehensible that they allow this. The ramifications are real life. You die. There's death. This isn't working at a grocery store and, the milk drops and falls every once in a while and it spills on the floor, or somebody isn't working as quickly as somebody else and, this other person has to take an extra 6 customers a day. That is not the ramifications. That is not the repercussions of this. The repercussions are death. That is the option. The option is death and winning. Or you can win and you can live. Those are the two answers. You can die and lose, or you can win and live. So to go off of this, I have a New York Post article written by Lee Brown, and this is another big one in the news. Simulated war game with China shows likely defeat. From the United States. So the U.S. Air Force has been simulating war games over Taiwan and escalating tensions with China, a battle that military leaders fear would likely end in crushing defeat for the U.S., according to a report. Last fall, the latest war game was based on a Chinese biological weapon attack that swept across U.S. bases and warships in the Indo-Pacific region more than a decade in the future. It ended with devastating Chinese missile strikes and air and amphibious assaults on the island of Taiwan. So we've been having these issues with Taiwan. China's trying to push its influence around. That is in current day standard. That's what's going on. We are afraid of them attempting to take Taiwan. So what we do is we simulate these war games, and it seems like we are very likely to lose in a war over Taiwan with China, which is a serious problem because China is the other superpower in the world other than us. Russia does not compare to them. They're the only country that is a very formidable foe to the United States. And they're also our diametric opposition because they are a authoritarian spy state country, and we are supposed to be a free country. Doesn't feel so free lately, but that's what we're supposed to be through our Constitution. So Air Force Lieutenant General S. Clinton Highnote, Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategy, Integration, and Requirements, also admitted that the recent trend in war games was, and I quote, not just that we were losing, but we were losing fast, end quote. Then he states next, the definitive answer if the U.S. military doesn't change course is that we're going to lose fast. In that case, an American president would likely be presented with almost a fait accompli. Fait accompli meaning that it is going to, it's going to be our fate. They're going to be presented with, this is our fate, we're going to lose, and then a country is going to be taken. This is serious. This is real life here. Republics only last for so long. In a general sense, they usually only last 200 to 250 years. We're at that point right now. We are right in the, what you would call the wheelhouse. So there's that. And speaking of China, I have another article from the Epoch Times. Eva Fu is the author. Tariffs will not be a topic of discussion in meetings with China. They're going to be having a meeting in Alaska. I guess that's their version of neutral grounds, even though it's really not. It's U.S. territory, but it's the closest U.S. territory or U.S. state to China. So they're supposed to be meeting on March 18th. And when asked about what exactly the questions are going to be for China, is what we have this article for. The United States will voice concerns on March 12th about the regime's actions on Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan, and issues raised by Asian allies, Beijing coercion of Australia, their harassment around the Senkaku Islands, their aggression on the border with India, Sullivan said. So this will stay more in that zone than get into the details of questions around tariffs or export controls. So this guy Sullivan, that's supposed to be the, I think that's the Secretary of State for the Biden administration. He added that they'll convey the message at a broad level that the administration will take action to protect U.S. technology from being used in ways that undermine American values or security. So they're more worried about the security of the United States. They're going to be talking to them mostly about the harassment in other countries. They're really worried about China's power in the region over there. But in terms, and he goes on, but in terms of the details of these issues, we have more work to do with our allies and partners to come up with a common approach, a joint approach, before we go sit down point by point with the Chinese government on these issues. So he doesn't want to get into specifics, I guess, about what they're going to be talking about. But they're really worried about them on the front of the interventionism of the military, of their military operations over in the region. So I'm trying to think of Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. That's the one who they quoted, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. I knew I wasn't finding the right name. So they said that. And then additionally, at the very end here, it says, on March 11th, the day of China's annual legislative meeting in Beijing, and this is a very important point here, the regime's 2,895-member Congress rubber-stamped a draft decision to control Hong Kong's elections. The electoral overhaul will make sure only Beijing loyalists can govern the city, a move that U.S. Department spokesperson Ned Price has described as a direct attack on Hong Kong's autonomy, its freedoms, and democratic processes. So, just to try to clarify, Hong Kong was taken by China probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. China invaded Hong Kong, took away their freedom. The Hong Kong people were supposed to be independent of China when they were given their freedom from the British monarch years ago, and I believe that freedom was supposed to technically end, or they're supposed to get back together with China in 2050, I think the year was, but China decided to just jump right into the region and take over Hong Kong. So now China's, their Congress, 2,800 people, they confirm now that they're going to control Hong Kong's elections and ensure that only CCP members, the Chinese Communist Party members, and Beijing loyalists are the ones that are going to govern the city of Hong Kong. So they are losing their freedom by the day, more and more incrementally over in that country. And Hong Kong originally, I remember when it came out, Trump was giving them a hard time. The NBA talked for 2 seconds about it, and then they got shut down instantly because they're afraid, because they make 30% of their money from China, because the NBA is full of people that talk about social justice, but they are not about social justice. They can care less about social justice when it comes to their wallet, even though they're making tens of millions of dollars to take a 30% pay cut when you're already making tens of millions of dollars just for your ethics and your morals. You would like to think that they would maybe take the dive, but they could care less. In all honesty, they could care less. That's why the stool, Barstool Sports, the Presidente, El Presidente, made that shirt of LeBron James wearing the Beijing comrade hat and the whole get-up, which was hilarious. So big businesses. What I have next is I'm going to talk a little bit about big business. Very interesting, this article from, let's see where I got, from Breitbart. Big businesses like illegal immigration. Neil Monroe is the author. And very interestingly, it talks a little bit about immigration. Then in the very end, they have a part where it's talking about big business and the tech industry, which I find very perplexing. So it starts off, the Kids in Need of Defense group was co-founded by Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. And the Kids in Need of Defense, or it is a fund to help illegal immigrant children immigrate here illegally, or find family members within the country that they could stay at their house. The group has a huge list of corporate backers, and it claims that it helped deliver roughly $450 million in pro bono legal services during 2019. So we have big corporations back them. They are run by the president, or they're co-founded by the president of Microsoft. $450 million on legal services to get illegal children legal services. The Washington Post report spotlights the determination of Biden's pro-migration deputies to extract migrants from Central America and to pull them through U.S. immigration loopholes into the U.S. labor market, regardless of the popular federal laws or the public deep opposition to wage-cutting labor migration. On March 10th, for example, Roberta Jacobson, Biden's border policy chief at the White House, told reporters that, and I quote, "Going forward, we will continue to look for ways to provide legal avenues in the region for people needing protection," end quote. There is much evidence that the migrant youths are looking for jobs in the United States, partly because low-wage U.S. jobs can generate money for families at home, even when the sent money home is quietly taxed by local gangs. So we have people coming here that are looking for work, essentially, and we have big corporations helping these people get here. And you wonder, why is that? Which I've said many times. This illegal immigration, this immigration in a general sense, lowers the wage for the worker, lowers labor costs, which is the reason why it's being endorsed by big companies. So it goes on. For years, a wide variety of pollsters have shown deep and broad opposition to illegal immigration, to illegal labor migration, and to the inflow of temporary contract workers into jobs sought by young U.S. graduates. The multiracial, cross-sex, non-racist, class-based, intra-democratic, and solidarity-themed opposition to labor migration coexists with generally favorable personal feelings toward illegal immigrants. The deep public opposition to labor migration is built on the widespread recognition that both legal and illegal migration moves money from employees to employers, from families to investors, from young to old, from children to their parents, from home buyers to real estate investors, and from the central states to the coastal states. So whatever way you cut it, legal immigration, illegal immigration, especially illegal immigration, because at least legal, we can somewhat gauge what's going on. We can regulate it to ensure a reasonable wage for the worker. Illegal immigration, we have absolutely no idea how many people are in the country, and that's really what the problem is. They're not good. It is not good to have illegal immigration for the worker, for the lower class worker. And you say, oh, and then you notice it's big corporations and it's big tech that are endorsing this. And like I said, I had an article a couple shows ago talking about how U.S. graduate jobs were going to people that were here on work visas because they knew that they didn't have to pay these big tech corporations knew they didn't have to pay the same payroll taxes for those individuals. They only had to pay federal income or state income tax, and that was it. They didn't have to pay the whole Social Security, the Medicare, Medicaid, because that's not given to people that are not citizens. So 77% of tech employees think big tech holds too much power. This is a 9to5 Mac piece written by Ben Lovejoy. And this is a poll that was carried out by Protocol, is the name of the company. 1,500 employees were polled, and they conclude with this study that 77% of the tech employees think that big tech actually holds too much power. And to speak to this, I have a Project Veritas video. Undercover, they have an individual that works, I think it's at Facebook. He's one of their executives, and he talks very briefly about how much power Facebook has. Play 7.
I work for a company that is doing a lot of damage in the world. It's doing a lot of good, but it's doing a lot of damage. I mean, no king in the history of the world has been the ruler of 2 billion people. But Mark Zuckerberg is.
Facebook and Google are no longer companies, they're countries. They must be stopped. The government needs to step in and break up Google and Facebook. It's a better thing for the world.
The single biggest thing is this company needs to be broken up. No king in the history of the world has been the ruler of 2 billion people.
That is Benny Thomas. He's the global lead. I think it's the global lead engineer. What is he? Global lead planning lead at Facebook. He's saying 2 billion people are under the power of Mark Zuckerberg's whims. And no man has ever been this powerful before, and he thinks the government should break them up. Now, this is a common theme amongst tech employees. So this is the Protocol study that we have here. A whopping 78% of the tech employees we surveyed agreed that the tech industry is too powerful, with just 11% disagreeing. The same goes for Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, and Apple. Over 77% of respondents said that those companies have too much power, and just over 8% disagreed. So just in a general sense, 77%, so 3 out of every single 4 tech employees think that these big tech industries have just too much power. Not only did the majority say that the industry is too powerful, but around 40% also said that tech does more harm than good. So 4 out of every 10 of the employees said that it does more harm than good. Only about 45% of tech employees disagreed, signaling that even within the industry, tech workers worry about the negative impact technology is having on the world. And yet, remedies are in short supply. More than 68% want their companies to partner with or be acquired by a big tech player, and 3/4 said big tech companies should be allowed to acquire other firms. Just over 40% think that Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, and Apple should be broken up. So still, that 4 out of 10 is huge. They think that their own company that they work for should be broken up. Despite their concerns about tech's power and negative influence, tech employees don't see antitrust enforcement as the solution. Now, interestingly enough, they go on to talk about China a little bit in this one. On China, a majority think the U.S. government has been too aggressive, worrying that an equally robust response from China could cripple U.S. tech companies, which I think is very interesting. So there must be some giant tech apparatus that runs out of China that we have tech employees in the United States afraid of U.S. interventionism with China. The Trump administration adopted a hawkish stance towards China's tech industry, placing dozens of companies on the country's trade blacklist and signing multiple executive orders aimed at barring Chinese social media apps, most notably TikTok, from the U.S. tech employees. By and large, said they think the standoff should end, expressing an openness toward working more closely with Chinese tech firms. Which this, I think, is troubling indeed. 56% of respondents said they agree that U.S. restrictions on Chinese technology companies have gone too far, while 28% said they're neutral on it, and 60% agreed that U.S. tech companies should work more closely with Chinese tech companies. Ultimately, a majority of respondents said they believe the future of the tech industry is at stake, with 58% agreeing that a Cold War with China could cripple U.S. tech companies. There are limits to their openness to Chinese tech. However, 46% said they agreed Chinese telecom company Huawei should be banned from the U.S. So I think I figured out why these U.S. tech employees dislike the idea of sanctions on China, because they know. And this is it's very funny how everyone bends the knee as soon as their pocket is somewhat impacted. The designing, you cannot find a phone that is made in America, folks. There is not a phone. And when you say made in America, what are you talking about? You can find phones that are designed in America. For example, the iPhone is designed in America. Same thing. Microsoft phones, I'm sure, are also designed in America. They are manufactured in China. That is why we were able to pay our designers so much money, because they're saving so much money on the manufacturing of the phones. If that were not the case, I'm sure phones would probably cost at least double of what they cost now. If you have a phone that comes out, it's $500, the phone would have to be at least $1,000. At least. It may even be more than that, because they're paying low, almost penny-like wages. If you have a iPhone, they're paying these people almost next to nothing to make your iPhone in China, which is why a lot of these tech employees know that if they were to shut down that system, if we put some hardcore sanctions on China like we have in the past, and China says, okay, well, we're not going to manufacture your phones anymore, guess who takes the hit? Guess who takes the money hit? It's going to be the designers. It's going to be the tech employees. They're not going to be getting paid the insane wages that they're currently getting paid now, which that all makes sense to me, I guess, then. So yeah, even tech employees think that Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, as in Google, and Apple should all be broken up. There's a bunch of them. 40% of them think that, and 77% think that they're too powerful. So next, speaking of very powerful, I have the legacy media had to walk back their story on Donald Trump, the erroneous story that they came out with. Washington Post had to retract the story, and at this time, the damage has already been done pretty much. On the story, I have a clip of the media talking about the story. The whole story is Trump talked to somebody that was in the government over in Georgia, asking them to check into, I'm trying to think of if I could find the Georgia Secretary of State released an audio recording. They misquoted him, and the source was anonymous, as always. So they have anonymous sourcing in the Washington Post. This is a regular occurrence, by the way, by the Washington Post. And then what happens when the story comes out to be incorrect or erroneous, days later, they come back and they retract the statement, and they put out a new statement. Problem is, damage has already been done. Everybody already thinks a certain way of Trump, so this is just confirmation bias at that point. So play 10. Check out all the news agencies that were running this story. Play 10.
NBC News confirming that President Trump called Georgia's chief elections investigator to, quote, find the fraud, saying that official would be, quote, a national hero.
President Trump personally called Georgia's lead elections investigator and demanded that person produce evidence which didn't exist and, quote, find the fraud, adding that if they did so, they would be a, quote, national hero.
The Washington Post reported yesterday that President Trump called a Georgia election investigator and pressured him to, quote, find the fraud.
And President Trump apparently pressured an election investigator to find the fraud. Again, not the phone call out of Georgia, another one.
We now know of a second, there's so much, a second call from President Trump to Georgia officials about trying to overturn the election. He reportedly told an elections investigator in Cobb County to, quote, find the fraud, and then that person would be a national hero.
So you had the media run with the story like wildfire. It's allegations, and when they went back, I think it was the FBI that had to investigate, they found in a trash folder the actual audio conversation. It's about a 10-minute long conversation. That is not the truth. Trump did not tell her to find the fraud and did not tell her that she would be a national hero if she found the fraud. So from the piece, directly from the Just the News piece, Alex Nitzberg is the writer. And this is straight from the Washington Post, what they said. And I quote, correction, 2 months after publication of this story, the Georgia Secretary of State released an audio recording of President Donald Trump's December phone call with the state's top elections investigator. The recording revealed that the Post misquoted Trump's comments on the call based on information provided by a source. Trump did not tell the investigator to find the fraud or say she wouldn't be a national hero if she did so, the outlet noted. Instead, Trump urged the investigator to scrutinize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, asserting she would find dishonesty there. He also told her that she had the most important job in the country right now. A story about the recording can be found here. The headline and text of this story have been corrected to remove quotes misattributed to Trump. So they're just walking it back because they're afraid of getting sued for reliability. And Trump actually releases a statement about it, which is pretty Trumpian. I've been noticing some of the statements that are coming out by Donald Trump. I think he's actually writing them himself because it sounds like he would have wrote them. March 15th, 2021, statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States of America. Now it's about 2 pages long. I just got 2 paragraphs from it. The Washington Post just issued a correction as to the contents of the incorrectly reported phone call I had with respect to voter fraud in the great state of Georgia. While I appreciate the Washington Post's correction, which immediately makes the Georgia witch hunt a non-story, the original story was a hoax right from the very beginning. I would further appreciate a strong investigation into Fulton County, Georgia, and the Stacey Abrams political machine, which I believe would totally change the course of the presidential election in Georgia. And then he goes on to wreck the media in this next, he states, and this is where I really think that he wrote it. You will notice that establishment media errors, omissions, mistakes, and outright lies always slant one way, against me and against Republicans. Meanwhile, stories that hurt Democrats or undermine their narratives are buried, ignored, or delayed until they can do the least harm. For example, after an election is over, look no further than the negative coverage of the vaccine that preceded the election and the overdue celebration of the vaccine once the election has concluded. A strong democracy requires a fair and honest press. The latest media travesty underscores the legacy media outlets should be regarded as political entities, not journalistic enterprises. In any event, I thank the Washington Post for the correction. That's the very end where it says, in any event, I thank the Washington Post for the correction. That's where I think that he writes it. But yeah, so the media is dishonest. This is something that they did. These are consistent smears. This was consistently done during the Trump administration, which is why the media is now known as activists. They're not journalists. There is no journalistic integrity from them. What they do is, the Washington Post does this very often. They'll come out with an anonymous source because then there's no one to sue. There is no issue that the Washington Post would have putting a statement out from an anonymous source, because there's no liability there. There is no chances of getting sued by Trump, because Trump is a person that will sue. He has the lawyers. He has the money to do so. So they did this consistently through his campaign, smear campaigns where the person never comes out. And you can just create an anonymous source out of nowhere. When I hear, oh, it's an anonymous source, to me, it is meaningless. If you're not willing to step forth, because every single person, every single American has the right to face their accuser, if you're not willing to step forth and state what happened, then I just do not believe it. Because to me, if the media is willing to run with any story. Now, next on the Trump front, I have Fauci talking about Donald Trump and how he should be telling his constituency or his voters to get the vaccine. Play clip 3.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
Now, conspicuous by his absence in that public service announcement was President Trump, and here's why that was important. According to a recent poll, 49% of Republican men said they don't intend to get the vaccine. Doctor, how much of a difference will it make if President Trump, who was largely responsible for the success of Operation Warp Speed, how much of a difference will it make if President Trump leads a campaign for the people who are most devoted to him to actually go out and get the vaccine?
Chris, I think it would make all the difference in the world. He's a very widely popular person among Republicans. If he came out and said, go and get vaccinated, it's really important for your health, the health of your family, and the health of the country, it seems absolutely inevitable that the vast majority of people who are his close followers would listen to him. He's such a strongly popular person. I cannot imagine that if he comes out, that they would not get vaccinated. It would be very helpful to the effort for that to happen. I'm very surprised at the high percentage of Republicans who say they don't want to get vaccinated. I don't understand where that's coming from. This is not a political issue. This is a public health issue.
I think that at first, when there was distrust in the vaccine, that was propagated by the Biden campaign, saying if Trump had anything to do with it, then I wouldn't trust it. I only trust it if Dr. Fauci said so. Now is making the Democrat Party look hypocritical. Now they're worried because they think that they're seeing that there is a flow of less and less people going to get vaccinated. They are worried for this because they have their certain numbers that they like to meet. And it seems like that might not be happening maybe. Maybe people are slowing down and they're not getting the vaccination. And I'm not I'm not the anti-vaxxer. I don't really know. I don't read much, but I've been reading into these different stories. That boxing legend that just passed away. There's a story about Hank Aaron after he got it. Apparently he was fine, and until suddenly he was very ill and then passed away shortly thereafter. So, and this story was the same with this boxing legend that just passed away recently. His name right now escapes me. But the reason that they're so stupid, this is the way the Democrat Party thinks. If Trump came out and said take the vaccine, a bunch of more people going. The first thing is automatically we're going to pin this on the Republicans. We're going to pin this on the conservatives that don't want to get vaccinated. We're going to pin the entire problem. They are the problem. The fact that they don't want to get vaccinated, they are the problem. That's the first part of this. And then the second part is they think everyone's so dumb that they only listen to Donald Trump, and that's the way that they think. That's the way Democrats think in their politics. They just think of whatever their leader says to them, their grand wizard leader that they pray to every single night. Whatever they say to them is what they're going to go do. They take orders. They are in lockstep. They wait for marching orders from their supreme leader of the Democrat Party. They lick the hoof of the Democrat donkey. In other words, the Republican Party, the conservatives don't listen to leaders. If we had Donald Trump come out and tell us to hand all of our guns to the government, the conservatives would not listen to Donald Trump and go do that. The conservatives are setting principles and setting standards, bodily autonomy being one of them. Your right to do what you will as you please with yourself, with your body. And then there's that weird argument that always comes up from the left. Oh, well, what about abortions? Oh, abortions, really? So who ends up being hurt in the abortion? Oh, wait, it's not your body. It's another human life, isn't it? Oh, okay. It's a completely different, separate human life. It is not yours. It has its own specific DNA strand, its own specific characteristics that are predetermined by its chromosomal structure. So let me just keep going on here. The conservatives believe that they have their own freedom to do as they please. Donald Trump comes out and tells them to do something that is against the principles of conservatism and against the principles of liberty and freedom. The conservatives aren't going to go follow whatever Donald Trump says into a lake. Will there be some? Yeah, I'm sure there a couple probably, but there will not be many of them following him into a lake. And Trump wouldn't go out and tell anybody to do that. But I just think it's very perplexing that the first problem, of course, when they realize that their numbers aren't coming in and they're realizing that they propped up the manufacturing of these vaccinations, and now they're realizing we're going to have a bunch of vaccines sitting here that are going to be unused, and we're going to look like a bunch of morons at the end of this. So what's the plan? What do we do? Oh, we shift, and then we just point the finger and we blame the Republicans, because that's the answer to all of our problems always. So next what I have Jake Tapper actually in the same interview talking to Fauci about social distancing. They are now going to be cutting it from 6 feet to 3 feet of social distancing. Play 5.
There's a discrepancy. Some places, some health organizations say 3 feet or a meter is enough. But here in the United States, we say 6 feet. There's this new study from researchers in Massachusetts, just out this week. It found no significant difference in coronavirus spreading in schools where there was 6 feet of distancing versus 3 feet of distancing. But that 6 foot requirement, that's one of the main hurdles to reopening schools.
Right.
Does this study suggest to you that 3 feet is good enough?
It does indeed, and that's exactly the point I'm making, Chuck. What the CDC wants to do is they want to accumulate data, and when the data shows that there is an ability to be 3 feet, they will act accordingly. They have clearly noted those data. They are, in fact, doing studies themselves. And when the data are just analyzed, and it's going to be soon. I mean, Jake, you're asking the right questions. And the CDC is very well aware that data are accumulating, making it look more like 3 feet are okay under certain circumstances.
Now we have the guy that was making national policy now referring to everything with the CDC guidelines, making like the CDC is now the main arbiters of what is supposed to be done with COVID restrictions in terms of social distancing. Once Jake Tapper brings up a study done now disproving this entire time for the last year what Dr. Fauci has been telling people to do. He disproves him, and then Dr. Fauci goes back as if everything that Fauci was saying was based strictly on CDC. And that's just not the truth, folks. He says, "Oh, if you listen to the science, if you interpret the studies, if you look at the mitigation, if you view that, then you know through the studies that 6 feet of social distancing yield the highest efficacy rate that you can find out there." That's what he said the entire time. He's been saying that for the entire year, and now suddenly CDC comes out with a study concluding that 3 feet and 6 feet of social distancing doesn't make a difference. They both yield the same effectiveness rate. Now he goes back, oh, well, the CDC, this is what they say, and this is what we should do. We should follow whatever the CDC says. So this is a guy that has not been practicing medicine. I think it's almost been 40 years. Apparently, with this whole HIV case, he covered up a lot of wrongdoing that he did in his studies there. I think I want to say it's at least 20 years. I know he has not been studying medicine. This guy has just been a government bureaucrat to the core. The fact that he's been there that long is the problem, and he is a politician, the fact that he has been there for that long. So next one I have Biden, and I think this is the very last article. It is, and then I'll have a couple quick headlines for you. I'll have a lot more than usual. A lot of news coming out. As you think, it seems like a short... I was actually just looking on my screen before, and Cardi B right now is fighting Candace Owens online. Candace Owens is just torching her. She is like the human flamethrower. She's just lighting Cardi B on fire. And watching Cardi B debate Candace Owens is like watching like a collegiate athlete versus a Pop Warner football player. It's just such a joke. She spells everything. Cardi B can't spell. She's all about getting ratings, and now Candace Owens is talking about a defamation lawsuit because Cardi B's lying, saying that her husband's cheating on her, all this stuff. But to get back to it, Biden is planning his first major federal tax hike in 30 years. Daily Wire piece written by Ryan Saavedra. I've been reading different accounts of this. They're talking about raising the capital gains to what I recall 39%, which would be decimating to our stock market, and would also throw out the regular retail investor. The point of that higher tax would be to exclude the retail investor, the little guy, the middle class, from investing and leaving it only to the hedge funders themselves to make money. So this piece, it starts off, President Biden is reportedly preparing to follow up with this controversial COVID-19 stimulus bill with his plan for the first major federal tax hike in nearly 3 decades, so 30 years. Bloomberg News reports, and I quote, unlike the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 stimulus act, the next initiative, which is expected to be even bigger, won't rely just on government debt as a funding source. While it's been increasingly clear that tax hikes will be a component, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said at least part of the next bill will have to be paid for and pointed for higher tax rates. Key advisors are now making preparations for a package of measures that could include an increase in both the corporate tax rate and the individual rate for high earners. It continues, his whole outlook has always been that Americans believe tax policy needs to be fair, and he has viewed all of his policy options through that lens. Sarah Bianchi, head of U.S. public policy at Evercore ISI and a former economic aide to Biden, told Bloomberg News. She continues, that is why the focus is on addressing the unequal treatment between work and wealth, end quote. The Tax Foundation reports that the top, and this is to counter what she says here, that the top 1% paid a greater share of individual income taxes, 40%, than the bottom 90% combined, 28.6%. So what this study is saying, the 1% in terms of income in this country paid 40% of the income taxes, whereas the 90% combined only pay 28.6% of the taxes. So this idea that the 1% or the top 10% in the country is not paying taxes is it's incorrect. So if you actually want to put that in context, the top 10% of this country, so 1% of the country, the top 1% richest people pays 40%. So if you take the number of 90%, 10% of the country, 10%, the top 10%, they pay 71.4% of the individual income taxation. Pay a huge percentage. So this idea that the rich needs to pay their fair share just is not adequate. It is not accurate. They are paying a very, very large proportion of their money. To begin with, I've always been an advocate for a flat tax rate myself. So sources within the Biden administration told Bloomberg News that the administration was going to push for the following tax policies. And let's see if I can find... Oh, I missed them. I'm going to find them. Don't worry, folks. I have them here somewhere because they are very damning. In particular, I remember looking at them. Oh, okay, so here they are. Raising... I'm getting all these things from the Daily Wire site. Candace Owens has her show. Speaking of Candace Owens, okay, so these are the proposals from the Biden administration. Raising the corporate tax rate to 28 from 21%, so we're going to raise it 7%, the corporate tax rate. Paring back tax preferences for so-called pass-through businesses such as limited liability companies or partnerships. So in general, a partnership or an LLC usually is a smaller business, so they want to actually get rid of their tax preferences and make it harder for small businesses to survive. That's what another raise they want. in the taxes, raising the income tax rate on individuals earning more than $400,000, expanding the estate tax reach. So they want to tax you for your estate. Or when you pass away or when you sell, when you go to sell, they're going to tax you higher. They were also talking about earlier a wealth tax just on how much you own, just giving you 2%, giving the government 2% of what you own every single year, which is absolutely, it could be astronomical numbers. A higher capital gains tax rate for individuals earning at least $1 million annually. Biden on the campaign trail proposed applying income tax rates which would be higher, which is insane. If you want to apply income tax rates to capital gains, it's going to be it's like I said, it's going to be 39%. That's how much it will be. It will be a 39% capital gain tax rate. So, and apparently this is all going to go to corporations. Everybody disagrees with the idea, the trickle-down economics, but either way, the tax is going to be paid by either the consumer or the employee. The owner of the business usually is not going to eat the tax just because they're working on margins themselves. So this will affect you in your pay increases and your pay raises and your bonuses, as well as when you go to the store to buy things. This may also affect you, maybe more expensive. So the piece goes on. And Bianco noted, and Bianco is a president of, Jim Bianco is the president of the Bianco Research. He told Axios that there was a serious threat of inflation that would damage the real economy and the stock market because of this. And talking about the spending. He states, and I quote, if we get to 2.6% or 2.7% on the core inflation number, that's the highest level we would have in 30 years, Bianco noted. With the 10-year yield at 1.1%, and with the stock market at a new high and a forward PE, which is the earnings ratio of 24 times earnings, that's going to be a problem for risk markets to see that kind of level of inflation, even if the Fed says that they want that level of inflation. So he's just saying the inflation rate increasing this much is the most we've ever seen in 30 years, and somehow the earnings is 24 times more than the new high. It's just the problem is everything's just going to inflate. The market, even if the numbers go up, the market will artificially be going up with inflation. So it'll make it look like your stock's doing really well, but then you realize at the end of the day, it's all just inflation increases, and the increases aren't actually on fundamentals in the market. So that ends that, and now what I have is I have my 5 headlines. And speaking of economy, effects of hero pay in California. A bunch of businesses, small businesses, even big businesses such as Kroger have been shutting down in California because they implemented a hero pay in certain specific municipalities in California, and that ran Kroger out of business. Let me see if I can find any other names. 3 more Krogers in the area were shut down. A bunch of businesses were having this problem, and I've covered this before. I want to see if I have any more other than that. No, that looks like it's it. Just a quick look at it. But yeah, check that one out. That one is a hot air piece. News ratings down. This one's pretty substantial. dailycaller.com. And I have a chart here up on the screen. What we're seeing is the primetime cable news weekday change in audience here from March the 1st through the 5th, comparatively to November 30th to December 4th of 2020. Don Lemon's show saw a 32% decrease. Anderson Cooper, 32% also. Cuomo show, 28% decrease. Chris Hayes, 16.7%. The Ingram angle. So if you look at Fox News, Ingram angle's only 9%. Hannity's 11.9%. Tucker Carlson's only seeing a 4.8% drop. So if you compare the conservative news outlets with the liberal ones, the liberals are losing a third almost of their viewership. In general, CNN, almost everybody's at a third of their viewership. In terms of MSNBC, they're generally seeing numbers that are a little bit closer to Fox News, because they're not that they are reasonable, but they do not consistently lie to their audience on what their political affiliation is. They're clearly liberal. They state they're liberal. They're pretty outright with their liberalism, whereas CNN tries to act as if they are a news organization that is unbiased, and that is just not the case. So that's some interesting numbers there. We're seeing once Trump leaves politics in general, everyone's seeing a big dip in watching, because there's just nothing. There's nothing to watch in general. Cases aren't going to be followed with the same intensity or the same enthusiasm when Trump's not involved in politics. Trump was like the WWE version of politics. He made it very interesting. He grabbed the viewer's attention by having him on TV. And he took questions very often from the media. The news cycle with Donald Trump just moved so quickly. If I had to do this show during a Trump administration, it would be very difficult to sift through all the information and try to find some of the most salient points. Now, rumbles about infrastructure spending estimated to be $2 to $2.5 trillion. This is a New York Post piece. This is stimulus right after we come through with this spending bill. Now we're going to come through with a bill to build up our infrastructure, which is another money grab for the government. I just think the government's coming out with implementing all these plans so they could take more and more money out of your paycheck, make you much more reliant on the government, and that is the point of all of this thus far. And this $2 to $2.5 trillion, I think, would be over a 10-year period. But that's a New York Post piece. The last one I have, another missile strike on U.S. troops in Balad Air Base in Iraq. I'm very surprised I've not seen this on the news. This is an American military news article. And apparently it was a rocket that attacked an Iraqi base, and there were some U.S. contractors there. Last time the news reported it. I don't know what the answer is going to be. Apparently, they're suspecting that it was the same group that attacked U.S. contractors last time, leaving, I think, one injured. I don't think they died, but they were injured. And it landed, apparently, in near a civilian's house in the area. It is thought to be Hezbollah, that is the extremist terrorist group that is attacking, from what American military news has found so far. That's what their belief is. But that's going to be it for this. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. As always, please drop the mic on people. That is the only way people learn about the podcast. It's the only way the word of mouth is the only way that this podcast gets around. So once again, I'm very happy. I'm very grateful for the increased viewership and the interest among a new audience. Hopefully some hardcore conservatives, maybe some liberals. I could change your mind, hopefully. So I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.